Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. So this morning, I'm excited to have my friend Valda Ford, a registered nurse and public health expert who specializes in making healthcare make sense, which I'm sure all of us have had those challenges with that. She is known for making complicated issues simple and enabling conversations between diverse groups. And Valda, yesterday when we were chatting about you being on here and you're like, well, I don't know about the food tie-in. And then we just started talking for a good 45 minutes about food and your role in it as a nurse, but also as a person. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. It's so good to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here. And you and I connected probably 4 or 5 years ago through a women's organization. So we've been chatting for a while now. So I'm glad to have you here. So I want to understand how do you, one of the things that you said to me is that you work tirelessly to find answers to complex questions that really have to do with healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. As a registered nurse, and even before I became a nurse, I was the mother of a child born with a heart condition. There seemed to be a big disconnect between what I needed to know and what healthcare providers were either willing to tell me or felt that I would be able to absorb. And later, working in trauma, intensive care, and all over the world, I found that there is a huge chasm between what we need to know as consumers of healthcare and what we get told. So sometimes it's just about us learning to change our language. Healthcare providers have bought into jargon many times, and it's hard for them to speak like real people. And so I love the idea of finding the words, the conversation, the examples that will make whatever condition make sense.
And that makes sense. I mean, having had shoulder surgery 2 years ago, I mean, a lot of it's over your head and you read the bills and you don't understand what any of that means. And you're getting charged. I didn't know that person in the hospital was a contractor. I thought they worked at the hospital, right? So, and then you're getting separate bills from all of them because you didn't have that. Mm-hmm. So thank you for doing that. It's a big challenge. And the fact that you mentioned heart disease, because this is heart health, what did you learn about that going through that entire process with your child? But then also let's talk about it with women as well.
Well, heart disease is the number one killer of everyone. Most people think about heart disease and especially heart attack as something that happens to men. We see the stereotypical red-faced sweating man clutching his chest, and we think that's what a heart attack looks like. Well, certainly that is not necessarily what it looks like, and specifically not necessarily what it looks like in women. When I was trying to navigate life with my son, I found that many times healthcare providers don't know that we have the capacity to know everything there is, or just try us out. And then these days with Google, you can pretty much find out everything, though. Cautionary warning here, about 85% of healthcare information on the net is junk and is not based on science. It's just someone talking about something. But heart disease, I found specifically, most people don't know what a woman's heart attack looks like. Women are more likely to die, even if they present at the emergency room, because they don't have that red-faced, sweating, clutch chest kind of situation. And women can have just, tiredness and, my shoulder hurts, or I'm not sleeping well, or I've had a cough. And therefore, people at the ER are saying, you need to see your primary care provider, or you need to see a therapist, or at least you need to get out of my face. And unfortunately, women are more likely to die because they go home where they've actually had a heart attack and it's been undiagnosed. And of course, time is muscle. So the faster we know it, the more likely we are to save the person and to prevent permanent damage.
Well, it just popped into my mind. I remember watching an episode of, I think it's 911 on television, and it was the main character, one of the Black women's mom, who was older in age, had that, and she had those symptoms, and she's like having a heart attack, and they took her. No, she's fine. She's not having a heart attack. Yeah. And it took her, who just became an EMT, to see the signs.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that no healthcare provider in general, of course, there's psychopaths in every profession, unfortunately, but no one is thinking, oh, let me make sure I let this person die when they show up at the ER. But the most important thing is to know yourself and to be very comfortable and confident in saying, no, I do not feel well. Something is really wrong. And will you check a little bit more? And that can sometimes make the difference. And we are doing as much as we can to educate all the people who are at those touch points. Please pay attention. Please take the time to do an EKG. EKG these days, it takes longer to put the leads on than to actually run the test.
Wow.
Done in 30 seconds, where it used to be a big complicated thing, but now is really simple. Anyone who worries about having heart disease and potentially being at high risk for heart attack should use the thing called Cardia. It's a little fingertip thing you can use yourself, basically like your phone. But the most important thing, if you don't feel good, especially if you've been feeling tired for a long time, you have any symptoms of like unabating indigestion, just jaw pain. A lot of women have jaw pain. A lot of women have a cough, and they don't have any kind of situations. Just make sure you're a good historian and say, this has been going on for this amount of time. Even more importantly, know your numbers. Take your blood pressure regularly. Don't let somebody tell you your blood pressure is fine. Know what your numbers are. Make sure that you know what your resting heart rate is, and you're able to take a pulse such that you can see, oh, this is feeling a little strange. And don't take your pulse with your thumb, because you're not supposed to. Anyway, if you need to, check at your carotid artery. It's big and you can feel it really easily. Check for a full minute, but pay attention to the rhythm, regular. To the strength. Is it bounding? Boom, boom, boom. You can literally feel that. And if you exercise and check it, you can kind of see where it is when you're still versus when you're stressed. And how do you feel? What's your color like? For African American women, many times because of the melanin in our skin, you may not see the darkness in the lips. So learn to look at the gums. Do the gums? Oh, wow. Yeah. Do the gums look dark? Do you look dusky? Just generally not as vibrant. And sometimes that is what can save your life.
Wow. That I had no idea. I mean, because there's so many different touch points that it could have impact you. And I'm hoping that doctors are looking at all those different, or being taught all those different things to look for as well.
Yeah, they definitely are. The problem is, there's just a lot to learn. And especially these days, healthcare providers are pretty stressed out. About 20% of healthcare providers have decided to give up healthcare because they've been working nonstop. They have to stay and do shifts, like the law, say in North Carolina for a registered nurse, is if I go to work and I'm supposed to get off in 8 hours and my replacement doesn't show up, then I am bound by law to stay 16. So, and if I leave my patients in such a way that they are not cared for, then I can lose my license for abandonment. So many people.
Wow.
That, yeah. So you already have unsocial hours. You're working when other people are sleeping. You're working when other people are partying. You're working holidays. And now you have the law, which is not meant to be punitive. And it's not to be something that would typically happen. But COVID has been another situation. And I know my colleagues who are registered nurses are just worn out. So the same thing for the doctor leaving too. And so that means you have fewer people who are looking after you, more people who are tired and stressed out, and more things that might present like, well, that's probably COVID. And even though COVID is something to deal with, it's not an emergency until such time as it gets bad. So make sure that you know yourself and you're willing to speak up for yourself.
That is really good advice. I mean, and actually I emailed one of the PAs that works at the ER recently on her day off. And I'm just like, hey, asking questions. So they're getting them not even on office hours, right? They're getting them when they're not at the office, just because we know that's what they do, get their advice. Mm-hmm. So I want to jump in, change the subject a little bit and touch a little bit on your health and how you changed some conditions that you had by changing your diet.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I've had the good fortune of being a registered nurse and being in high-level academic medical centers and trauma centers, having access to great physicians, dietitians, you name it. But still, when I found myself in trouble, I was having these allergic reactions to everything. I'm a person who usually isn't allergic to anything, but I was allergic to everything. If I walked to my mailbox, I might get a rash or sometimes hives. I'm trying to figure out what it was. We went through a number of things. And one day, coincidentally, a PA was checking my shins and she found out that I had pain, and further tests yielded that I had a really bad vitamin D deficiency, actually adult rickets, which rickets, who's heard of rickets since we talked about scurvy and rickets? It's not something in the United States.
Right, exactly.
And so I messed around just trying to get a lot of things set up. And I was going into medication after medication. Well, it's allergy, it's asthma, it's reflux, it's whatever. So it was one med and then another med to combat that med, to accentuate that med. And I was up to something like 14 medications, which is totally ridiculous.
Right.
But I thought about, what can I do? And the more that I read, and some people that I knew were really into health. And like we talked about earlier, being vegan for a while. I do it every January and have done it for a year or so. I decided to go straight to the ground. That's what I call it. When I have something going on, and if I was smart, I would do it all the time, I make sure that I totally change what's going on. I only eat fresh caught, fresh cooked, fresh killed. And so that way, there are no preservatives in the link. And I feel quite confident that we have no idea how badly we are affected by the preservatives in food. Most of us are eating vegetables from South America and fruit from Asia. And many things are done to those things in order to make them survive the journey. And then, of course, there's the can, there's the other thing in a package that we rip open. What I found is that when I let go of all of that, my body said, thank you so much. We love you. And we're going to show you by getting rid of all these inflammatory symptoms. So my body doesn't I'm not gluten allergic or intolerant, but things that come with gluten and around in that family, pasta bread, things like that, don't really like me. I can eat them and I'll gain 3 pounds. And that is my body showing that it is inflamed. If I do that long term, it's going to simple inflammation to long term and perhaps create a condition. So for me, I was able to change things around with my vitamin D. I did have to do supplementation, but I also got rid of everything else by eating fresh vegetables, eating things that were freshly caught or cooked. And I'm better. Now I swim for an hour every time I get a chance, 3 or 4 times a week. I can walk 3 or 4 miles, and I'm not a spring chicken, even though I look like a baby. At 67, I can tell you.
You look fabulous.
Well, thank you. At 67, I can tell you that I'm in as great a shape or better than I was at 50 because I made those modifications. And it's not about the don'ts. It's about finding what you like looking at moderation. If I want some cheesecake, I'm having some cheesecake, but I'm not having it every day. I make it special, but I don't deprive myself. But eating better, eating smarter has made all the difference and will probably help me add some years onto my life.
Well, and it reduced your medication cost and it reduced the doctor bills and even if you're adding a little bit more money to your food and beverage budget, you've reduced your costs other ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had co-pays for 14 medications. So even if it was $10 a piece, which it wasn't, that would have been $140. I believe I was up to about $400 a month in co-pays at the time. So that was too.
Yeah. You're like, okay, that's a rent of some sort, right?
Yeah, that's a vacation in the Caribbean at the end of the year.
Well, that is true as well. Yeah, $4,800. Wow, yes, totally. Yeah. And we have to think about it that way too. So maybe we spend a little bit more on our food and then we can get a Caribbean vacation instead, right?
Yes. And if we plan it out, I actually found that it wasn't costing me more because taking the time to prep that food gave me more food. Actually, I was eating fresh vegetables, take up more space in your belly than processed food will. So I was actually eating less, but higher quality. I could tell in my skin, I could tell in my energy, I could tell in the things that came out of my body as well that, oh, we like you. We're happy. Thank you so much. Continue to do that.
Well, I posted in the Eating in a Meeting Facebook group 10 things that I learned or 9 things that I learned being vegan in the month. And one is that you are more regular. And I said, and that means going to the bathroom. And that's a good thing because our bodies need the fresh vegetables, they need the water, and we need to process them out as well. So what is that book? Everybody Poops?
You know? I don't know, but I know that one of the reasons that we have such high probability and incidence of colon cancer is because we're not regular, because stuff sits in our system for a long time and it's not supposed to. We should be just like our little pets and go once or twice or maybe even 3 times a day. But you can tell the difference in the quality, the quantity, the smell, everything. Once you put a lot of vegetables in your system, your poop doesn't stink.
Okay, good to know.
Isn't that wonderful?
That is wonderful.
The chlorophyll does it. The chlorophyll does it. It might, but it's not like, ooh, sometimes you're like, ooh, who was here? Was that me? Oh my God. Don't let me eat it again because it died and stayed inside me. So it makes a difference.
Wow. Okay. There's so many conversations that we could have about that. That's interesting. Yeah. And, or you now know who doesn't eat vegetables when you're hanging out with them potentially.
Now, sometimes people can eat beans and it's a whole other story. However, in general, I had a female friend who was concerned about her female parts not smelling fresh. And what could she do? And so we went to a lot of greens and she even added chlorophyll in the form of gum, etc. And her husband was much, much happier.
Interesting. Okay. And especially since I've seen a commercial for
and all those things, yeah.
Deodorant for all of your body parts, right? Yeah.
We don't need that. Our bodies are self-cleaning. And if we would just give our bodies what it needs to have, then guess what? They would treat us well.
Okay, that's really interesting. So one of the things that I wanted to also talk about is I love the fact that you have your red shirt on, but you planned the Heart and Red Dress event. Say that again.
The Heart and Soul Red Dress.
The Heart and Soul Red Dress event that helps bring women together for financial, educational, and occupational experiences. But the story, and it was a question that I asked you, have you ever had a negative experience with food and beverage? And I thought it was interesting that you said that a woman at my table was trying to eat around the walnuts on a Thunderbird salad because she didn't know she had the right to ask for a different salad.
Right.
That's so empowering to me.
Yes, I was actually shocked. I mean, I grew up in a low resource household. Let's say it as gently as we can. We was poor, but I grew up without a lot. So we kind of ate the same things all the time. We ate pinto beans and white potatoes and sometimes some biscuits. That's what I lived on. So it's amazing that I'm still here. But that's what we had and that's what we did. But as I grew older and as I went into better resources, and especially after I became a registered nurse and I understood the importance of eating better food, then I ate differently. I also celebrate with food. And so I was bringing women of low resources together with women of higher resources to talk about heart disease and having a day where women take care of themselves. I set it up in such a way that they would come and be pampered for an hour and a half. It ended up being about 3 hours before the event. They would have hair and makeup and
that's awesome.
Yes, and have caricature artists and lots of networking, nails done, all of those things done so that they learn that at least this one day a year, they needed to put themselves first. And in doing so, I made sure that my original budget was not a limiting factor. I had, I don't know, maybe $4,000 to do something with 100 women. And so basically that's church basement, potato salad, fried chicken kind of situation. But I raised the money and I ended up with 400 women in a very nice event center where we put out beautiful food and made sure it was served with linen, napkins, tablecloths, crystal, and china. And the young woman who just happened to be at my table, I saw her kind of picking at the salad. And I said, "Oh, if you don't like it, don't worry." We brought women in from shelters, from housing authority. We had the Red Hatters. So we had all age groups, except it was 18 plus, but we had 18 to 80. And so she says, "No, I like it, but I can't eat nuts. I'm allergic." And I was like, "Oh my God, stop right now, stop." And I called the waiter over and said, "Please bring me a salad without nuts," which he immediately brought back. And she was just kind of shocked. And I asked, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh, I didn't know you could send your food back." She thought that she just had to eat around it. And so when you talk about bringing people to the table, he had not been brought to the table, even though we didn't have anything. We still had a tablecloth. We had some china. I don't know who it had been passed down from, or it was just so special to us that we treated it appropriately. But we set the table. We did all of those things. And she did not know any of that. And so I came to recognize that even though I had managed to get them to the table, we got limousine companies to go pick them up in the big limo buses, and some came in the like SUV limos just to give them a real special day. I still didn't realize that I hadn't bridged all the gaps that there are. They didn't know what good food looked like necessarily. Didn't know that it was not only their right, but their responsibility to say, "This will hurt me," and not try to work around it.
And there's somebody online, my friend Leanne has been posting about bullying around food allergies and all the jokes that happen about food allergies. And just what you just said is like, "This will hurt me. This will potentially kill me." I mean, we have to allow them, us to be able to say that without being bullied or without being disregarded.
Yeah, I remember being on a plane, and as speakers, we're always out there. We're on the run. I was getting 100,000 miles a year on one or two airlines every year. I was accustomed to going up to first class and having something decent, but first class isn't the same anymore.
No.
It is. But anyway, I was sitting in the back, and I always prep for when I travel. I'll have some nuts. I'll have some cut pineapple. I'll have a few things that I can eat, regardless to whether or not I have time to stop in the airport, if there's anything worth eating there. And I was just about to eat my nuts, and the lady came, kind of excuse me. And I looked over and she said, please don't eat those. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, don't eat those nuts. I'm allergic. And I thought, at first I was really like, I don't care. I hope I'm a better person than that. But I was thinking, I am starving to death and these nuts are all I have. But sure enough, I said, well, good for you. Good for you for saying, look, that might hurt me, because we know that nut allergies are just super bad. That,
Right.
nut dust in the air and breathe it in and have an emergency. So I asked the flight attendant, what do you do? I know you've stopped serving nuts, but do you make an announcement that there's somebody on the flight with an allergy? Or please identify if you are, so we can try to do that. And she was like, no, we don't do that. I said, well, what about for the other people who might need some food? What if I'm a diabetic? Can you just decide you're not going to give anything? But I was expecting I could at least get some crackers or something.
Right.
Oh, we didn't think about that. But I know some of the airlines have changed their policies about making sure there's something on board, and to try to bridge the gap between potentially hurting someone and giving you some snacks so you're not mean to the flight attendants.
Yeah, it is. It is a big conundrum with airlines as well as at events as well. So how do you balance them all out? Because a larger number of people actually have different dietary needs. It is, how do you figure it out? But I think it comes down to that respect. Mm-hmm. Right. And even though I tell you, and you should be telling the airline in advance before you get there, so that you have some backup in talking to the flight attendants. And unfortunately, some people have had some bad experiences with flight crews on that. But being conscientious and communicating and owning yourself, right? But then also giving, hopefully the people who are hearing it, if they do hear it, are respectful. Yeah. Yes. So I know you have got to run because you're giving back to the community today. Yes. And I want to thank you again for being on here and being a registered nurse and doing the work that you do. Thank you so much.
It is indeed my pleasure. And I hope that everyone who's listening will pay attention to the things that keep them healthy. Just take the time for yourself. Get out. Give yourself 30 minutes a day to relax and get some fresh air if possible. Eat the best foods that you can afford and get good sleep, and make sure you have love in your life.
Oh, that's a great, having love in your life is super important. And I just posted your website in the comments below so everybody can find you at valdaford.com. And one last question before you leave. Do you have a favorite food or beverage?
Oh, my favorite food is basically, it's going to be butter pecan ice cream. I don't know
yummy.
The age that I love it, but really right now I really love experiencing new fruits and vegetables and grains and learning how great they taste after being a longtime carnivore.
Yep. And I learned that over this month. There's so many versatile things to do with fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains and stuff versus just steaming some broccoli.
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you, Valda. I look forward to catching up soon. Hopefully I'll get to see you when I'm driving through Greensboro on the way to Charlotte. And everyone stay tuned. I've got another guest coming on right after this, my friend Jennifer Hill Booker. But Valda Ford, thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay. So as I said, I've got another guest coming on to the show. It's a double duty this week. I'm so excited to welcome my friend, chef and cookbook author, Jennifer Hill Booker. Okay. So Jennifer, you're coming to us from your house in Atlanta, right?
Yes. I am currently in Lilburn, but yes, Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. And I wanted to get you on the show today because you're about to go on a cruise.
I am, and not just for leisure, but actually as a guest chef for Windstar Cruise Line, who has partnered with the James Beard Foundation and invited James Beard affiliated chefs to be the guest chef on some of their cruise liners.
So it's really exciting what they're doing. And it's, a couple of things. Can you explain to people what the James Beard Foundation is first?
Yeah, for sure thing. So James Beard Foundation is an organization that really focuses on food equality within the food system. And that's from everyone, front of the house, back of the house, line cooks, dishwashers, chefs, restaurant owners, food truck owners, just making sure that there's equity across the board. They really push sustainability in the choices of produce, seafood, meats that we choose. And they really are advocate for food justice. And then for myself, I'm one of their impact fellows, which is for no waste. And what that means is running a full use kitchen, or really trying to use every part of everything that we eat to the nth degree. So it's an organization I've been involved with for years and trust and admire.
Well, and they do some really good work.
Yes, I think so.
The one of the things that you said before the show in my guest form was that one of the negative situations that you see in the kitchen is knowing that food is being wasted just to achieve a look.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. And I think a lot of the restaurants are kind of getting away from that, mainly because we're having such a hard time in the food service industry. So we're grabbing onto every single penny, which means getting as much yield as we can from every ingredient. But if you think back, I guess early 2000s and below, it was, what does food look like on the plate, and that kind of avant-garde look, and one piece of celery and a tiny little chicken, whatever. And then a lot of those cuts to create that super linear line or that one little cube, unfortunately, some of the other waste of that would end up in the trash. And I know people say, oh, but I compost, but that's also the trash at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So to achieve that look, a lot of food was wasted. And I think we're getting away from that as consumers, saying, hey, we don't need that. And then, of course, as the chefs, saying that we're not going to present that. So it's kind of finding its way full circle as far as sustainability goes.
That's a great idea. And then we also have to address the restaurants that give us 4 times as much food that we need to eat but still making that one serving look hearty, because sometimes you get it and you're like, that's all I get.
True. And it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line of economics for the restaurant, the establishment, for the consumer that may say, hey, this is a meal that I need to stretch for 2 meals. So what does that look like? And I've talked about this concern with other chefs, and like, what do we do as that front of the house person? Do I say, hey, it's okay to have a half order? Because people who dine know that if you wanted to split a plate, like Tracy, if you and I went for lunch and we're like, we're going to split this entree, they upcharge you for that convenience, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. And then you have too much food. But saying, hey, you could do a half order if you want to, and making a customer feel okay doing that. And it's not a big deal. It's not a big spectacle. And also just doing smaller portions that are maybe more than we should have if you look at a diet pyramid, right? But not so much that all we do is pack it up, take it home, and throw it in the trash anyway, which often happens.
Leftovers in general, people forget that they're in there.
They do. Especially people.
Yeah, whether it's the leftovers from home or the leftovers from the restaurant, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I've known you for a long time, and you actually nominated me to be a La Dame des Escoffiers, so thank you very much. One of the phrases that I found on your website, but I think I've known as well, is that you want food, or you feel and think and know that food should taste like food. Can you explain that to me? Because there's just a lot of things that are prepackaged that don't.
Yes. So when I say food should taste like food, and to be honest, I heard this from a fellow chef, John Canadu, when we talked together at Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School in Tucker, Georgia. And so students would make their dish, their assignment for the day, and he's like, food should taste like food, which means it doesn't need to be over-seasoned or over-sauced or made to taste like something, but it should taste like its natural state. A carrot should taste like a carrot, an onion should taste like an onion, pineapple should taste like pineapple. And in the less processing, which means the less salting, or maybe the less preserving, the less cooking, definitely the less packaging that you can do, is ultimately what you want to do to have that dish taste like its true form.
It's really important. And especially, I think we can see that a lot more when people are looking at the plant-based options and eating more plant-based and vegan, if you want to put that word onto it as well. There's a big contention between those two words sometimes, but I think it helps bring that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you're right about the whole vegan or that title or that label gets people's dander up. And I think because it came out, or maybe it was perceived, perhaps introduced, as a very elitist title, right? It was, I can only eat, or I only eat. And so people perceive that as, okay, you're doing a little
That's
too
true.
much. But when you say it, hey, I'm just plant-based, I do all plants, or I do 90% plant-based, then we all settle down. Say, okay, I can respect that. And I can see that. And my daughter told me a joke years ago. She goes, how can you tell a person is a vegan? I'm like, how? She goes, they'll tell you. And I was like, and therein lies the problem.
Now, you have a couple of cookbooks.
Mhm.
Which one is somewhere in my house. I probably should have found it before I had you on here. And it's good Southern food. I mean, you grew up in the South, right?
Yes.
So talk about your Southern roots and what that food means to you.
Sure. I have to always preface it with Southern cuisine gets a bad rap. And for whatever reason, the assumption is we're all grease and gravy. And that is absolutely not true. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta, Alabama, Georgia. We're all in a G, or probably A6 growing season, which means we get to grow produce pretty much all year round. And you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And they're inexpensive, especially if you're growing them yourself, like our family did. So you have that, and that's what you eat. You eat what you grow and what you have. So you may have lots of greens and beans and string beans and potatoes and fruits. And yes, you may add like a smoked meat to it, but not very much. And you also add in the fact that meat or protein is more expensive than the vegetable. So it tended to be less, heavy protein and more vegetable forward. So that's what I grew up on and absolutely love it. We always had at least 2 cooked vegetables and a salad for every meal. And I've duplicated that for my family. And we have just beautiful abundance of produce. We set a very beautiful table. And occasionally we have some fried chicken or some macaroni and cheese, but it truly is not an everyday occurrence. No one can survive on that type of diet for very long.
Well, and Valda, who was just on, was saying that there's such a variety with the fruits and vegetables and the different flavors that you can bring out with them, whether it's a grain or a vegetable or a fruit. It's not just steaming it.
True. I mean, I love roasting vegetables in the fall and winter. I feel like it helps heat the house, right? I have to cook anyway. It really caramelizes, so it brings out the natural sugar in that vegetable. It adds some texture because it gets nice and crisp. It changes the color, so you have some variety to eat with our eyes. In the summer and spring, I do the same thing, but on the grill. So you get that smokiness, you still get the caramelization, but you can tease out a lot of flavors from your fruits and vegetables. And don't be shy about grilling fruit. I mean, grilled pineapple's delightful, grilled plums, believe it or not. Peaches are really good. I tried grilled watermelon. It gets a little soggy, but you can kind of finesse it, play around a little bit.
That's interesting. I never heard of grilling watermelon. I've seen the pineapple and peaches, especially at Cook's Warehouse. We've done grilled peaches at Cook's Warehouse. So you mentioned sustainability and the James Beard stuff and food waste. So food waste, but then also eating sustainably. And you mentioned that Georgia can grow year round. So can you talk about how you can incorporate the seasons into your menu planning?
Oh, for sure. And I'll be honest. So I first started eating seasonally as a child because that's just how we ate, and we ate what we grew. So it came in each season. And then when I started my own family, what was in season was always least expensive. So when you have a budget, new husband, new home, or new partner, or even just solo, your money for food may be very fixed. So you look and see what's on sale. And the produce that's in season is going to be less expensive than out of season. And so that's really what started me eating seasonally. I would pick up the newspaper ad or go online and see what's on sale. And then I planned my menu. Once I planned my menu, then I found my recipes. A lot of people do it the other way around. They plan this menu of all these great things that they want to eat. Then they find these recipes, right? And then they go grocery shop and they find that it's very expensive or it's difficult to find. It's not in season. It's not sustainable. For example, salmon, we're going to have to let that go. But flip it around. See what's in season. See what's on sale. Then plan your menu. Then go grocery shop. It'll be less expensive. It's more nutritious if it comes from 20 miles down the road at a farm versus 20,000 miles across the sea. So give that some thought as well, the nutritional value of what you're eating.
Well, I love that as well. And when we're talking about, Valda mentioned individuals with lower resources as well, but some people in general don't know how to cook those vegetables, or they're going to that and they're seeing these seasonal things. I'm like, when I first moved to Georgia, I have to admit, I had never eaten a collard green. And my neighbors across the street steamed them with the red pepper and the vinegar. And I'm like, oh my God, I could eat these for days. And I call my mom. I'm like, why have you never made collard greens before? But it wasn't necessarily where we lived, right? But in Georgia, it's a big staple.
It is. Well, I would say nowadays and this is good and bad, but the internet, right? The World Wide Web, so many cooking videos on YouTube or individual blogs. Take a look and kind of see what's out there. I won't say everyone is a legit recipe because they don't all work. But if you're watching the video, you kind of get an idea of, okay, that looks like something I could try or something I can do. So if you run across, let's say, a rutabaga, and you're like, I have no clue what this is. Google rutabaga, see some videos on how they prepare it, look at the comments. I always do that. And then try it out. And you're not investing too much money on that one produce item. And you might find something that you really enjoy that you've never had before.
I don't know if I've ever cooked with rutabaga before. I know it was, never mind, I won't go there. It was a college drinking game that you had to pick the vegetables without showing your teeth.
Oh, no.
My friend Sharon always picked that vegetable. And I'm like, what is that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just go back to the Windstar cruises for a second. So you're going on an 8-day cruise.
Yes.
And you're the guest the guest chef for that cruise. But I love the fact that all 3 this season are all women.
Yes, I'm super excited about that. So I was geared up to go as a guest chef 2020. Anyway, before the world imploded, right? And so like everyone, there were so many changes and disappointments, etc. And so when they called this year, honestly, it was like in January, like, hey, we're gearing up for the cruises. Would you be interested to go? And I was like, I don't know. And I think it's because I didn't want to get excited and then to be disappointed again. But then I was like, yes, let's do it. They're like, we're only doing 3 this year. So, and I was like, okay, I'm in. And then I saw that Tanya and Lee are also going. So I'm super excited that we got some girl power, a nice diverse group of ladies and going some different places on the globe. So I am super stoked.
And you're going to the Caribbean, right?
I am, but luckily for me, a part that I've never been to. So we're kicking off from Aruba, then Colombia, then Costa Rica, and finishing in Panama. And to show perhaps my romantic side, we're stopping in Cartagena, which if you've ever seen Romancing the Stone, right? Like, so I'm so excited about that. More than the food even. I'm like so excited to go to this town.
Do some dancing. There
you go.
Yeah, there exactly. Now, because you're going to do some culinary demos on there, are you going to try to tie your Southern food into some of those flavors? What are you going to do with that?
Well, the cool thing about the Windstar Cruise Line is they want the chefs to cook our brand of food, right? Our voice, but also using local ingredients. So I talked with executive chef Peter Tobler, and we kind of went back and forth. And I said, well, this is what I'd like to cook. And he's like, okay, well, this is what is available. And so we kind of played that game and came up with dishes that really speak to my Southern and French culinary style and incorporating ingredients along the way as we go through the Caribbean. So, for example, I'm doing a citrus brined shrimp. And so obviously we're in the Caribbean, so we'll have fresh seafood, we'll have fresh citrus. I spent some time growing up in Florida, so that speaks to my experience there. We're doing some short ribs and potatoes and grits, so you're kind of getting really into that Southern hearty dish. And I'm just very pleased at how they incorporate local, sustainable, seasonal with the chef's own brand of cooking.
That's very cool. And yeah, I mean, that would be a lot of fun to do and taste that stuff, taste that food.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to talk about sustainability wise, because I saw on Instagram, you're opening up a restaurant, and we talked about this the other day.
Yes.
You're moving to Arkansas.
Yes.
And so, but the one thing that we were talking about sustainability, and you open your restaurant, because it's going to be a beer garden, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the thing that you said about the bottles, you want to share that too?
Oh, yes. My business partner is probably going to kill me. So we were planning the menu, and it's very traditional. Brats and sausages, pretzels. We'll do our own pickles and sauerkraut and French fries. But then we're also doing European and German beers. My partner's from Wisconsin. Hey, Dan. And so he wants to do some Wisconsin beers. So we were talking about, we'll have some things on keg. We'll have some wines on keg. We'll have some cans and then bottles. And I was like, well, does Arkansas recycle glass? And he's like, well, no. I mean, they do, but it's not something they pick up with the recycling. So we have to take it somewhere if we want to recycle it. And I was like, well, I'm not real comfortable with that part of having all this glass unless we set up a plan where it goes in a certain bin and we are responsible to take it to be recycled. Because if we really want to be and plan to be this restaurant that believes in sustainability, food-wise, and taking care of the world and our earth, if we're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And so that made us think, well, perhaps we'll shift the vessel that the beer comes in, maybe less glass, more aluminum that can be recycled, or even the kegs, which is better because then they can truly be cleaned and refilled. So it's something to think about that I never really considered before looking into the recycling.
Well, and we talked about how Decatur, Georgia, and Atlanta has stopped recycling glass when I was there. And so that is a big issue. But I'm like, I also think that meeting planners should look at that too. I'm like, what are you offering on your bars, your event bars? Don't order the beer or the beer in the bottles, right? Make it just the aluminum.
That's true. Well, and sorry to cut you off, but you're absolutely right. And I didn't think about it when I saw an influx of canned wine. Remember that first started and you could get wine in a can? I was like, is it really going to taste right? Not looking at it in a sustainable, recyclable way, looking at it in a taste and traditional way. But I agree. We have the power as the people who offer our goods. And of course, the consumer who purchases the goods, you very much have the power with your dollar. So you can say, hey, I love a really good German beer, but I'm not comfortable with it coming in the bottle. What are the other alternatives? And I think if we all do that, then it'll force us to look and see what the alternatives are, and perhaps even push our counties into revisiting recycling glass.
Exactly. Now, what about, you're in Arkansas. Do they have a growing season like Georgia does?
It's not as long as ours, but it is robust. So I'm excited about that. It's cool because I'll get to learn some new, sorry, you hear our dog in the back. She thinks she's the boss of the neighborhood. But I'll get to know or learn some new produce. For example, they have what they call black apples, and that's huge in Arkansas. And they have apple ciders that they make out of, and traditional apple cake, and all of those things. So we'll definitely plan to incorporate what grows there naturally into our menus.
All right, I'm going to have to Google black apples.
It's a really good flavor. It's like tart and a little bit sweet. So it's not overly sweet.
That's pretty cool. Now, one of the things that I looked on your bio, which I didn't know about you, is that You did some cooking for the culinary therapy for the cottages on Mountain Creek.
I did. So I enjoy cooking. Like when people ask, hey, what do you do for fun or your free time? And so my top three are reading, traveling, and cooking. And I find it very therapeutic. And this is me cooking some music, barefoot, maybe a glass of wine. So it's different than on the hotline. But I found that it also gives people a sense of accomplishment because you're cooking food, you're providing a meal for yourself and for your family. And that's something that no one can ever take away from you. And when people are suffering with mental illness, and sometimes that means they have difficulty making a decision or staying present or feeling positive about themselves, I found that if they can make a dish, even something very simple, it makes them feel like they've accomplished something. And then they get to eat that dish, right? And all of those great feelings and those tastes and those textures also help lighten their mood. And so I did some work with the cottages. I think I was there maybe 4 years and really enjoyed the experience. And I stopped doing it because it is a heavy job to see the clients that flourish, you feel good about, and those that really maybe don't flourish as well. And so I had to stop for a while because it was a heavy job.
Well, and it reminds me of some stories that I've seen of, and I think he's in Wisconsin, and he's helping inmates. They learn to cook in prison, and it brings them out, and that actually gives them a career after the fact. So I think tying the mentality and the thoughtfulness that comes with making food for others really can help in a variety of ways.
I agree. I have a friend, Chef Jimmy, in Michigan, and that's what he does. He's an executive chef at a men's prison, and he teaches them to cook. And then once they're released, they have that skill. And again, you can provide for yourself, you can provide for your family, you can make a living. And that is majorly empowering.
Well, 100%. I mean, when you know how to do something besides a bag of peas or whatever, it does even growing it. And I think looking and doing the gardens through slow foods, kids learn where their food comes from, and they're growing it, and they feel like so much more empowered that they're doing something that they're going to put in their bodies.
Oh, absolutely. I think that ties into what you just said, right? The empowerment and the wonder of taking that one little seed and growing it up to this big head of broccoli and then cooking that broccoli for dinner. For a kid who's like, I don't eat vegetables, to one who's like, I want to eat that vegetable every day. That's huge.
Right. Because
I made it. Absolutely.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier, and you are the president of the Atlanta chapter now, right?
Black president that we've had at our chapter. So I'm very honored to hold the position.
That is awesome. So can you tell some people about what Les Dames is and what the Atlanta chapter is renowned for, raising a lot of money to send women to get culinary careers? So you can talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Les Dames Escoffier was created to elevate and empower women in the food service industry. And so we do that through networking. We also do it through education. And we raise, as Tracy is saying, we usually have our one big event, and that'll change this year. We're going to do 2 big events, but we raise money for scholarship. And this is to send young women to culinary school and get them a boost into the food service industry. And we had our meeting yesterday for the executive board, and I shared with my board that after my undergrad, I went to culinary school on scholarship. And then when I lived in Europe, I went to Le Cordon Bleu in Paris for a year, and part of that was scholarship. And without those scholarship funds, that would have never happened. And who knows if I would be sitting here with you today having this conversation about culinary. So it's huge, and it is a big chapter. I think we're at 126 women. We've changed the membership requirements. It used to be invitation only, but we found internationally that may limit to some of the ladies that know we exist and us meeting those ladies. So now it's an open membership where if you want to be involved in this organization, you can apply for membership. It's still a selection process, but you don't have to sit in the corner and wait to be invited anymore.
I have so many names here in North Carolina that I want to add,
There you go.
to become members because we can grow. And I know Afternoon in the Country, which is the big Atlanta fundraiser, which was a great food festival that we did, raised what, $80,000 every year?
At least 80. I think at
Yeah.
our lowest year was 80,000, but it tends to be more than that. So it was a huge fundraiser. It really did beef up our scholarship funds. And of course, COVID hit, so that kind of quieted everything down. But this year, we're excited to say we're planning 2 events. And I won't be premature to announce them because we're still tightening up some of the details. But we're looking for a nice fundraising event in May and then another in November. And both will be for scholarship.
And listening, having been there, so when some of the scholarship winners came back, I mean, it just brings tears to your eyes how, I'm going to do it now too, what we've provided them, kind of like you said, you would not be here today without those.
Absolutely. It's huge, and we all can pay it forward, right? No one is where they are in a vacuum alone. Someone has advocated for you, even if you don't know that someone's name. And why not do that for the next person, the next generation, or even the person standing right next to you? Like, let's all advocate for one another and pay it forward for one another.
So I have a question a little bit about women in the kitchen and women in this field. Moms has been around for a while, but I think we see a lot more women in the news, in the culinary field out there. What do you see going forward for women being in more prominent positions in the industry?
I think it will happen as we continue to push and demand that it happens. It hasn't happened because this organization or this establishment that is male dominated said, hey, let's give the girls a chance. It's happened because very talented and tenacious women are just continuously pushing and paying it forward for the woman right behind them. And so I think that as that continues, you will see more women in positions of, I don't want to say power, but perhaps they're the ones that are setting the table and inviting other ladies to have a seat at the table, which doesn't really happen the way it's been set up.
Okay. Well, I'm encouraged by that. And I know the work that we do in La Dames tries to help encourage that as well. So keep up what you're doing. You're welcome. So to end it out, somebody actually, I don't know if it was you or not, posted the address for the new restaurant.
Oh, I did not, but whoever that is, thank you very much.
Yep. So that is posted in the chat. I did post out your social media so everybody can figure out where you are and watch you on this cruise and other times as well, of course. But my final question to you is, what is your favorite food and beverage?
Oh, gosh. I heard you ask your last guest.
Valda,
Valda. And I was thinking about that. My favorite beverage. I like a good old fashioned.
Okay.
But I don't want to say my go-to because that makes me sound like I'm a lush, but I do like a crisp gin and tonic with extra lime. Okay. Food-wise, I like savory and salty. So if you give me cheese and charcuterie and some really great bread, I have zero complaints. Yes.
That goes really a little bit with your French culinary training too.
That's true. I think it's a natural pairing. So
right, exactly. All right. Well, I'm going to have you come back after the cruise to talk about how the experience was and learn, because I've been on big cruise ships or whatever, but I wasn't one there with a guest chef. So I'm interested in hearing how it goes.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, these are small cruise yachts, I guess they're called. And I'm on one of the larger ones, windsurf, and it's only 312 guests. So that makes me feel comfortable as far as health-wise, but also I'm there for the luxury. So I will be reporting back when I get back.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate it. And everybody check out the chat. This is Chef Jennifer Booker, currently in Atlanta, soon to be from Arkansas. And I'll make sure that everybody's gets to know how to get a hold of you. So
thank you.
You're welcome, Jennifer. Until next time, everyone, stay safe and eat well. And we will see you next week.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.